Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Scott Giacoppo, and I am the Director of National Shelter Support here at Best Friends Animal Society. Today, we're going to be talking about an animal field services program that we refer to as problem-oriented response, and it's very heavily involved with heat mapping, which we'll get into in a moment. Before I begin, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background into who I am and why I've been chosen to speak with you today. I've been in this business for a very long time. I actually started working in animal shelters back in 1988 at a high volume shelter in Massachusetts. I then became a special state police officer for investigating animal cruelty with the Massachusetts SPCA in 1995. And in 1996, I was actually assigned to the Boston Police Neighborhood Policing Unit. And this is really important to mention here because this is where I really got my first taste of heat mapping and what it can do to solve community-based problems, and how to utilize the maps. And when you're looking at the maps, how to look at it in a way that really sparks creativity and helps drive strategy on what to do with what you see. That's what we're going to get into later on. In 2007, I became chief of animal control for Washington, D.C., where I actually did implement this program for the first time in my career. And it proved to be very, very successful in dealing with we had low staff and a lot of calls coming in, and we had limited resources to allocate. And this really helped us determine where to allocate those limited resources. I also had the honor of serving on the board of directors for the National Animal Care and Control Association, where I not only served on the board, but I did a stint as the president. And I was able to work with agencies across the country who are also utilizing heat mapping to address the community needs successfully. And so this isn't something that, I certainly didn't invent this. It's being utilized across the country very successfully. So I hope today that you'll be able to take something away from this and utilize mapping to create a difference in your community. I've been with Best Friends since 2017, where I joined as the director of National Shelter Support, and we built the program that I oversee now, which includes a lot of highly trained, highly committed, amazing people. We always say we have the best team and best friends. So anyway, so let's jump into it. What we're going to cover today is rethinking our roles as animal service officers, and looking at ways of addressing the problems in our community in a completely different way, and being able to identify and define the problems that we're seeing, how to build a response, and also how to measure success. And I think, that's the one aspect of most of the work that we've done over the course of the history of animal services is not being able to successfully measure whether or not the programs we're implementing are successful. And one of my favorite examples is the community cat program. For decades and decades and decades, animal control responded to the community cat situation by going out trapping and removing these cats. And we know now that it doesn't work. It never has, it never will. But we continue to use that as a tool because it's all we've ever done. It was a response to a problem that was never measured. The success was never measured. And to this day, a lot of agencies still utilize trap and remove as a response to the problem when we know it doesn't work. And then we're going to talk about some resources and some tools for you to further your education, so to speak, into this area. So rethinking our roles and responsibilities, animal services always, as I mentioned, has had limited resources for the work that we're responsible for. There's few too many officers, there's limited funding. A lot of agencies don't get the opportunity to provide themselves with training, and whether it's full-fledged certification or even in-house training, there's very limited opportunities for officers. And if you're an officer, you know this last one all too well, a never-ending call log. I mean, no matter how many calls we clear, they just keep coming. They just keep coming, and it seems to be a never-ending call log, so to speak. So, but what we really need to do is we really need to stop reacting, right? We are have historically been a very reactive industry, so to speak. We get a call, we respond. While we're responding, another call comes in and we respond to that, and so on and so on and so on. We are a reactive industry, and we need to stop that somehow. We need to find ways of really reducing and preventing the problems that are happening in our community. And as it says, using long-term solutions and innovative strategies, such as community cap programming and a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But we really need to become a more proactive industry so that we can get ahead of the curve, so to speak. Um, one of the biggest one of the biggest problems we see is it's the way we've always done it. And I hear that. I work with shelters all over the country, and I ask them, well, why do you do that? And that's the answer. It's the way we've always done it. And we need to stop looking at the way we've always done it and start questioning, is it the right way to do it? Right? Is it working? And just to reiterate on the measuring of the success of whatever program or strategy you're implementing, we need to make sure that it's working, not just because it's what we've always done. In traditional law enforcement, there is a policing model called problem-oriented policing, and that's what we're going off of today. It is successful. It's been around for years, and it's really looking at identifying a specific problem in the community, right? If you think about, probably all heard the term community-based policing or community-oriented policing, community policing, whatever. And that concept really looks at policing as a whole, right? The community as a whole. And it's if you look at it, it's more of like the 5,000-foot view, right? Where problem-oriented policing, which was developed, I believe, in the 70s by a man named Herman Goldstein, it really came down to looking at not just the community as a whole, but the individual problem. And that we need to address. And he came up with this model called SARA, and it's scanning, analyzing, response, and assessment, right? It's scanning what is the problem and what is exactly the going on, right? We're going to get more into this, each one of these components as we move forward. But this is the basis of everything. It's the SARA model. It's scanning for the problem. It's analyzing how big is the problem, why is it happening, where is it happening, and then developing a response. And then, as I mentioned, assessing whether or not that response is working. So when we talk about identifying the problem, we talk about data, and a lot of this is about mapping and all that. But I do want to point out that it is it's not to replace the officer's knowledge, right? Because as an officer, I mean, I was an officer for years. I knew my community well. And if you said, Scott, what's happening in this part of the town, this part of the community, I'd be able to answer that. But having the research and the data analyzed to supplement my experience and my knowledge of the community really carries it to a new level, right? So not only do we have the anecdotal and the information from the officer, but now we have the raw data that is showing you exactly what, when, where, and how it's happening. Really lends to it. So I don't want anyone to think that by using data and using mapping that you should be disregarding the experience and the knowledge of the officers in the community, because they are the ones in the community and they know what's happening. So when we talk about animal control data, what do we talk about? And I always say that shelter operations has had field operations beat for years when it comes to collecting data. We know about intakes, we know about outcomes, we know all of the data that goes into shelter operations, but very few agencies track field operational data. And I think that that's an area that's being missed. That's an opportunity, a missed opportunity. So what we were doing and what we encourage people to do is to collect every little thing we can about every single call, right? Every call that comes in, we want to break it down extensively. I'm going to show examples in a moment, but we want to know the call types, running at large, bites, tethering laws, whatever your ordinances may be, breaking them down extensively. And even then, drilling down, which we're going to talk because all bites are not created equal, and we're going to see that. We also want to know the outcomes. We in animal control love our acronyms, right? We have DOA, GOA, and GOA, gone on arrival, unable to locate, UTL. There's so many different acronyms that mean the same thing, and we seem to love them, but we want to be able to track them. And part of why I say that is because I was able to do a study in DC that showed that 87% of the running at large calls that we went out on resulted in a GOA. So we knew that 87% of the calls that we responded to resulted in an animal not being there. And that's a waste of our time, energy, resources, and taxpayer dollars. And being able to do a financial analysis of that was costing the taxpayers just to go out on your average everyday running a large call was a waste. And so we were able to set parameters on what would classify as a running at large call that would get an officer out there, sick, injured, causing a public safety threat. If an officer could get there within an hour, maybe we would, elevate it to a higher priority. But if we couldn't, we knew that as time went on, we knew that the likelihood of us finding that animal was so slim that it would be a waste of our time. And frankly, we had more important things to do. So we would, through a trained dispatcher, be able to talk to the complainant and coach them through dealing with the situation. And that's for another training topic. But that's one of the benefits of collecting all this data. And we also want to track the date and the time the call was received, not the time that the call was responded to, the date and time that the call was received. And I'll show you why in a few minutes, but it's very important to document when that call came in. And then intake, by species and reason. Was it sick or injured? Was it bite? Was it a nuisance? Why did that animal come in, and being able to drill down. I also want to touch on field RTOs. If you find a dog in the street and you are able to return that dog back home, which is the goal, right? We need to be documenting that for multiple reasons. One is to show the great work that you're doing as an officer out in the field, but also to show the real problem of animals being running at large in your community. You're not going to get a good representation of what's happening in the community if these calls aren't being documented. So I always recommend coming up with a disposition for, it was, just FRTO, field return to owner. And the other thing is the location, right? As precise as possible. And this is where we get into our mapping. And locations can be so critical for that. So when we start talking about mapping, this was there's two agencies in particular that I'm going to be highlighting during this presentation. One is the Kansas City Pet Project, and the other one is Abilene Animal Services in Abilene, Texas. And those are the two agencies that we worked with a couple of years ago to help them create mapping and to show them, what can be done, so to speak. So this is Kansas City. This is all calls for 2021. And looking at this, it really doesn't give us much of an idea, does it? You look at, we were able to say, which cases are an officer safety threat. Those are the ones highlighted in red with the red dots because those were, habitual offenders that involved a bite. Right. And then as we go down, the blue was, habitual offenders with no bites and so forth. And that gave the officer the idea of where their safety, concerns might be. But when you're looking at it from this perspective, it really doesn't give you much of an idea of what's happening in the program, in the community. And the same goes for zip codes, which you'll see in a minute. So as we drill down, oh, sorry. When I talked about date and times, this was a really interesting study we did in Kansas City when they first took over the contract from the city. The Humane Society Kansas City Pet Project took over animal control operations for the city. We did a study of when their calls were coming in and so forth and what those calls were. And you can see here, we learned really quickly that the majority of their calls were coming in between 6 and 11 p.m. And so we wanted to make sure that when they scheduled their officers, they scheduled them to be heavy during those times. So they actually moved to more of a split shift where the early morning officers were from that 7 to 9 shift, they were lighter on officers, and then as the day progressed, they increased the numbers of officers being on duty. And as always, stray roam calls were the number one thing that the animal that they were responding to. But interestingly enough, here they had a lot of cruelty investigations come through that superseded even their stray aggressives and their other areas of response. But this is the benefit of recording the date and time that they come in so that you can get an understanding. And I'm going to show you a great example from Abilene, Texas, regarding the bites that they experienced. So back to KC mapping. This is stray. This is their stray calls. Now, if you wanted to do just a general mapping of this and looking at your stray population, it's really not going to be much help when you're looking at it from this perspective. But when you drill down, right? And one of the most common things is drilling down to the zip code. And this is a great example of why that doesn't always work as well as it should, right? So if we're looking at a large zip code like this particular area in Kansas City, you can see that in this middle part, there's not much of a problem in that zip code. This is all one zip code. There's not much of a problem in the middle there. But if you look up to, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but this area up here is a high population of stray dog calls, right? Because it's symbolized by on the left-hand column map. It shows the different colors, and right in the center is that black dot that indicates it's a high volume. Then it goes out in red, yellow, white, and blue. So being able to drill down even deeper to the specific street and neighborhood really gives us a better understanding of what's happening in the community so that again we can allocate those resources. If it in this case, if we wanted to really address the really address the stray dog population in this area, we would avoid this middle section over here and maybe even this lower section in the lower right hand column and go right up here. This is where our resources are needed the most right now. But from a proactive perspective, if you look at the other dot that's blue with yellow in the center, um, that's a potential problem. That if we don't do something, it's going to turn a different color. It's going to get heavier, and we're going to have to react to that area, right? So in this particular case, yeah, we are reacting to this neighborhood up here in up top, but we have the ability to do more proactive work to prevent this other section from becoming like the top section. And this is what I love about being able to really zero in on your maps. Um, and when I talk about breaking down the calls, right? I mean, here again is Kansas City. 15% of their calls were stray roam. Then the investigations and then stray aggressive. So when you look at the way they were tracking their data, it really wasn't giving you an accurate view of what was happening because these here, stray aggressive, stray sick or injured, stray confined, stray habitual, stray roadway, they're all stray calls, right? So they weren't going into this top section. And one of the things I loved about this project is that we were able to look at, the discrepancies between how each individual officer were recording things, right? And being able to break it down like this, the stray aggressive, stray intake is really, in my opinion, a better way of tracking it than just the overarching stray roam that they were doing up here, right? So I do recommend breaking it down into these categories so that you're able to distinguish how many of those calls you are actually responding to. But it also brings up the question of consistency and, how are officers defining stray habitual, stray sick or injured? Are they doing it post, or are they getting this information at the beginning of, from through dispatch and all of that? I think it really helps to to condense and can make consistency within your reporting structure within the system. And when I talk about drill down, I had mentioned earlier, you don't have a dog bite problem, right? You have either, first thing you want to do is drill down on property versus off property, right? Because on property isn't necessarily a public safety threat that animal control can deal with, right? Off property, these are stray dogs that are out, or that dogs that are being walked by their owner, which, you dig down even further on that, stray restrained versus stray off leash, right? Being able to drill down really gives you an idea of what is happening. And a perfect example of this is during the COVID quarantine, bite cases across the country went up. And that was a known phenomena. And it was so well known that the National Institutes of Health and the Center for Disease Controls, I think it was those two, actually did a study on it. And what they found were, yes, dog bites did go up, but it was not originally. The argument was that animal control, because of the quarantine shutdown, animal control wasn't responding to every single dog running at large call, and that resulted in a lot of bites. And when the study was concluded, it confirmed that yes, there were a lot more bites, but the majority of them, the increase was on property in homes, right? So now what they hypothesized was that people were all stuck at home 24/7 with the dog. The dog's not used to that. The kid's not used to that. No one's used to that. And everyone's life was so disrupted that it resulted in more conflict, both at home and with the dogs. So there was actually an increase in dog bites during the COVID quarantine, but it wasn't those dogs running loose, and it wasn't animal control not responding to calls. It was dogs on property. And the only way they're able to identify that is by digging into all these bite reports. When you properly track it, you'll be able to pull those numbers up, and I'm going to show you in a couple of minutes. You're going to be able to identify where the real problems are. you know and when you run a map on neglect or cruelty cases, mapping it out with pet supply resources available, medical facilities, veterinarian clinics within the area. Are there deserts, right? And could that be a reason why some of these people aren't providing required medical treatment, necessary medical treatment, which obviously is a violation. But looking at the root of it, where is it happening? Is a result of it because it's a resource desert, and access to the care, which we all know is a problem. So being able to really drill down is what I'm trying to say. Drill down and look at each individual problem that you identify, and try and figure out the root causes so that we can address those root causes rather than just throwing a blanket over them like we have historically. So we want to analyze the data, and then we want to hypothesize the causes, which I mentioned about the dog bite thing. We always want to look at, what could be happening, what's going on, and then, strategize the response, initiate the response, remap the problem based on that, and see where you are. So again, this is Kansas City Pet Project. These are all their bite cases for 2021. They were accused of not responding to bite cases during the quarantine shutdown, and we did do this, and it corresponded with the CDC and the NIH study, which was great, because we were able to see this is off-property bites versus if you look at this is everyone, but these are just the off-property bites. There weren't that many, right? I mean, you look at the map, that's more than we want. I understand that, but compared to that, it's not. So most of those bites were on property. And then here is the bite cases when they were coming in, and on property versus off property. Again, getting with that consistency. If you look up here, we have on property owner, off property unrestrained, on property business other, on property all caps owner, and off property restrained. So looking at like the consistency with the officers and how they're reporting it, this was a perfect case of looking at what are they classifying these at. And one, some officers use the on property owner all caps, right? So if you look at, if you add it all together, the on property went through the roof, and the off property wasn't that bad. The off property made up less than a quarter of their bite cases. This is their bite cases only, and when they were coming in. So here is the map for off property bite cases zeroed in, and we knew it was a neighborhood, right? And we could zero in even further. This is again, it's a closer look at the zip code, but we were able to zero in more in on the actual neighborhood that was happening. This was one of my favorites from Abilene, Texas. This is all of the bites. They did not do the breakdown between on property and off property at the time. I'm not sure if they're doing it now. This is obviously from 2021. It's a few years old. But when we ran this, what we found was really interesting from being able to look at trying to figure out what's going on. So if you look at when these calls are coming in, statistically, most dog bites were occurring on Monday and Tuesday between 3 and 4 p.m. and mornings between 8 and 9 a.m. Now, that signals to me that, wait a minute, what's going on here? What do we think could be happening and where was it happening? And we identified where it was happening, and it was actually at a park. That one of the hot spots for Abilene was a very large, well used park situated in between a couple of schools and a recreation center, right? So we knew that after school, kids were in the park, and before school, kids were in that park or at the bus stop or all of that. So we were able to devise a strategy. To make a long story short, we were able to devise a strategy where it put officers on patrol in these parks in that park during these times of days, and we were able to take a proactive approach to the bites that were occurring in that neighborhood. And then we went back, we mapped it, and we found that yeah, bite cases did go down. So it's all about looking at all the data you have and getting as much as you can and looking at it through that lens of what could be happening, you know. And we can drill down even further and this was where we get out of maps, but this was actually, I love this from 2017. I know it's a little old, but Pitt County, North Carolina did a study on their bite cases. Because, in animal services, we all know that, protecting the public from dog bites is one of the key obligations and responsibilities that animal services have. When we talk about, public safety, that's what we're referencing is bite cases. So getting as much information as we can on bite cases is paramount to us being able to effectively do our job. And in Pitt County, the previous director there did a complete study on all of the bite cases and found that we know, right, nationally, unneutered male dogs caused 76% of all bites. I think that was a study that was done a number of years ago by the CDC. Here, the Pitt County, North Carolina, they proved it, right? They proved that it was uncivilized male dogs that created most of their bites. Right, 62% of their bites were unaltered, and the 12.6%. I'm willing to bet a lot of those, if not all of those, were also unaltered. So being able to look at this and say, okay, so what is our problem? Right, this is what I love about what they did was they looked at it and said, what do we do to address this? And they started looking at grants and providing low cost, no cost sterilization, particularly for male dogs, right? So it was them taking that, we need to sterilize these dogs, taking that the next step, right? We need to sterilize these dogs for public safety and being able to utilize that in their messaging and grant requests and so forth, being able to utilize the data in an unconventional way. Oh, I forgot. We also did Fresno. I included Fresno, California in this because we were also able to overlay schools with the calls because obviously schools are a concern. Most animal control agencies, if you even get so much as a stray dog call near a school, that elevates the level of priority from a level 3 to a level 1 maybe, depending on your agency. But most agencies do elevate the priority level for near schools. So we went ahead and did a map for all of the schools in the area. And this was really interesting because, part of our proactive approach to solving dog bites would be doing a dog bite prevention program in schools, right? This enables us to target the schools that are most at risk, right? Because again, as an animal control agency, we usually only have a few officers that can go out and do, if they can even do, go out and do an educational, at a school. We only have a few, and we only have a few shots at doing it. A map like this actually showed them where they should be doing it, which I love this. I mean, it just paints a picture of what's happening and where we are needed. Um, so, I've been talking a lot about strategizing a response and all that. I gave some examples and so forth, but we want to look at when are the incidents actually happening? What is your hot point for stray dogs running at large, right? You can do that. You with a good mapping program, you can go in and say, okay, when are most of the dogs that are running at large, when are they being reported and where, right? So that we can look at it and say, okay, this is the target area that we need to focus on. And being able to look at what other agencies have done in response to these problems, whether it's running at large or cruelty or bites or whatever, looking at what other agencies have done is an incredible resource because I can guarantee what the problems you're looking at, someone else has already looked at them and addressed them, and they know what has worked and what hasn't worked in their community. But reaching out, and that's one of the things I love about state animal control associations, as well as obviously the National Animal Care and Control Association. It provides that networking opportunity where you can reach out to someone, from, Fresno, California, all the way to Pitt County, North Carolina, and bring in Abilene, Texas, and talk about what have you done and what's worked and what hasn't worked, being able to strategize with them and find out what's already been tried and why didn't it work if it didn't work in your community, right? Also looking at what you've already done. Chances are, the problem that you're facing has already been tried. Someone's already tried to address it within your own agency. What have you already tried that didn't work? Relook at it. Why didn't it work? What could be done differently? Is there a different way of approaching that response that may have a different, a different outcome? I always point out that utilizing maps should never be used as a way of targeting enforcement, right? And it really bothers me when agencies will do a map and say, okay, this is where we need to send our team in to seize dogs and issue citations. Um, it is not intended for that, and it's a way of going in and being able to provide resources and being able to solve the problem. I come from the school of thought that when we go into those areas and take dogs and issue citations, that it drives a wedge between the community and animal services, and they just end up getting dogs again anyway. They just get another dog if they can't get their dog back, and it just creates a vicious cycle that has brought us to where we are today in animal services. And I think that this there's an opportunity for misusing mapping, and I consider that a misuse of maps. So I wanted to throw that out there. Um, so getting back to what I was saying, gathering support and including them in devising a strategy, you shouldn't be expected to know everything about everything, right? Talk to members of the community. Everyone always has that in every single community. There's that one person. In my old neighborhood, there was Ken. He sat on his porch every day and he just sat in his chair and he watched the neighborhood. He watched everything. He knew everything that was going on in the community. And I can guarantee there's one in your community too. There at least one person that knows everybody and everything that's happening. Talk to them, meet with them, chat with them, get to know them. They are a wealth of resources and a wealth of information for you to be able to better do your job in that community. But get their opinion. What's going on? Well, Mrs. Smith, she shouldn't be walking that dog and she's always, dropping her leash and, whatever. Or the kids are always leaving the gate open over there or whatever the situation may be. I assure you they know more than you will ever know unless you ask them. Um, and looking at stakeholders, elected officials, other government agencies, one of the things that amazes me is how many animal control agencies do not partner with the U.S. Postal Service, right? Every single letter carrier I know knows all the dogs in their community. They know where they all live. And I have been out with officers so many times where they just drive by. They pick up a stray dog and they just drive by the letter carrier. It's like, stop. Ask them, hey, do you know where this dog lives? Right? It is such a critical component to being able to return the dogs to homes without having to impound them, right? That and kids. I mean, kids, kids don't lie. Kids know all the dogs in the neighborhood. We just need to stop and talk to people. But that's including them in the strategy, right? Make it a part of your SOP that when you pick up a dog, you're looking for ways of identifying who to talk to in the neighborhood and who to ask if they know whether the dog lives there. Community leaders, the schools, right? Dog bite prevention programs, some of them can be really successful, but the one thing that is pretty much proven not to be successful are those what I refer to as one-hit wonders. You go out there, you talk to the kids once, and you wonder whether or not it ever stuck, right? Those generally don't work. A school assembly where the animal control officer comes out and says, act like a tree, or, whatever it might be. And, you know, they have their place, but I view it as just a part of the solution, right? You should have a multifaceted approach to going into the schools and talking to these kids. Like in Fresno, we talked about getting like the police canine unit to go out there because kids love that, right? Getting a veterinarian, getting a dog trainer, getting animal control to go out there, providing them with coloring books and kits. All of these things, it reiterates and it reinforces the lesson that they learned beforehand, right? And it makes it more likely to stick. And then of course there's social media and media opportunities as well. But we want to set the goals and set the objectives and then implement the program, right? The strategy. And saying things like we feel we can reduce the stray dogs running at large in this community by 10% over the past 6 months, whatever it might be, right? Set a goal and see, great to blow those goals out of the water, but set them and have something to shoot for so that you can measure whether or not it's working, which is what we're going to talk about now. When we looked at Abilene and we implemented the programs, we saw the cases drop. We saw them drop down, bites and bites and strays. We saw, spikes and then, peaks and valleys. But you could see in 21 when we really got, serious about implementing some of these programs, you could see them starting to drop off. And that was our way of measuring the success of these programs that we implemented. There are a lot of tools out there to refer back to and to again further your journey into this process. There are we Best Friends has a lot of resources on our network site. There's actually a problem-oriented policing website out of I think it's Australia. I think so. I'm not sure where that is, but they have volumes of work on mapping and strategizing and measuring, and yeah, it all relates to policing, traditional law enforcement. But being able to take some of the lessons that we learn from traditional law enforcement and apply them to animal services is something we should be doing more of. We talk now a lot about community-based, models of animal services. That all comes from community policing. And this is the next level. This is really drilling down and identifying the individual problems within the community. And the United States Department of Justice has a great website on community policing, and all of those websites give you opportunities to apply what you see there and apply them to animal services in your community, regardless of the size or type, whether it's urban, rural, any of that. There's something in there that you can take and apply to utilizing it in your community. And then the book Problem Oriented Policing by Herman Goldstein. I will be honest, it is a tough read. It's pretty technical, but it was an eye opener for me when I was looking for ways of really improving the services that we were providing to our communities. So it's a great way of moving forward. Um, and also looking at, does your city or county already have a GIS system in place, right? When I was head of animal control for DC did have one, right? And we were able to look at what they had, and utilize some of their work. Google Earth, there's an article on our network page on how to utilize, Excel and Google Earth, that to create a basic mapping. But if you already have a GIS system in your city or county, talk to your city officials about getting in there and being able to utilize it. It, if you're, especially if you're a municipality, it might be open to it. Um, Tableau, what you saw on through my maps, we use Tableau. There is a free version that you can use, for the public, and I suggest trying it. Tableau has a lot of bells and whistles, and it's really good being able to drill down into those specific neighborhoods, which is the goal. And some of them, like I know Chameleon and Shelter Love, and I think Pet Point might even have some now, but a lot of them already have mapping capabilities in there. Talk to your SME provider and see if your shelter management software has an opportunity for these. So, anyway. So, as I mentioned, the public, excuse me, the public version of Tableau is right here. You can take this link and check it out. We have done presentations on it at conferences. It is a really good free way of doing it, limited. So, just wanted to share that. So that's about it. And please, if you have any questions or if there's anything me or my team can do to help, feel free to reach out via email. And thanks for joining us today. And I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.